Hey, I'm Don Amero, and this is Through the Fire, a podcast about overcoming adversity, reframing misfortune, and celebrating courage. On this show, you're going to meet some really incredible people who have been through some heavy stuff, but they've come through the other side. And the hope is that you're encouraged and inspired by the words that you hear. I'm Don Amero, and I've got my guest today, Kalsey Kulyk, all the way from Edmonton, Alberta today. Kalsey, how are you?
I'm great. Just doing music and being a mom and just doing the thing. What about you?
I'm doing music and being a dad.
Love it.
It's a real juggle sometimes, like I've been saying this lately too, is that, it's busy no matter what. Like if I'm busy with music or I'm busy at home, there's no in between. It's kind of always busy. I bet you would say the same.
Oh my goodness, totally. Like I was just thinking about it this morning when I was getting ready, and I was like, I just released my new single called Ain't Enough Whiskey. And my family is super amazing for, because I have my 18-month-old son, Wilder. And I was thinking like, man, there's always something. So when Ain't Enough Whiskey was about to come out, my sister graciously took my son for 4 days because Eric's also busy as well, my husband, in music and doing a bunch of stuff, right? So we are always like chickens with our heads cut off. And so I was just thinking that like, man, we've just not stopped, and it's been amazing, right? But it's like, I would love to just like sit and do nothing with like my family for like a week, but that's just not our reality right now. It is wild how when you have a kid and you're a musician, I feel like it's a wild ride.
Well, especially like, we're entrepreneurs, so we're always trying to create our path in some ways, right? And so part of that is at least my perspective a lot of the time has been, if I slow down, then what, because there's no CEO up above me that's sort of dictating how things will run. So it's really up to us to decide the path ahead.
Oh, totally. I even find like when I do have some time off, I'm like constantly thinking, okay, what can I do for social media? Or like, I have this idea for this song, and like, when am I going to be able to sit down and write this? Or, I should reach out to this person. We should get a write on the books. And it's just, you are always thinking, which is great. You know what I mean? But, it can be like a little bit overwhelming sometimes, for sure.
It's a double-edged sword, I think.
Yeah.
And, the word balance comes to mind all the time for me, of trying to find that the in between, like there are seasons when my career is just all in and it's everything. And then there are seasons when it's all family and all, and I've kind of just coming out of that now, where it's been like 2 months of just dad life, and it's been great, but it's been cloudy.
Yeah, totally.
Is the way I describe it.
Yeah.
Wilder, that's a great name for your boy. Where does that come from? Where does that name Wilder come from?
Honestly, there's no like story behind it. Eric and I were we were not agreeing on names for boys. I find boys are a lot harder. Like we thought we were going to have a girl, so we had like 5 girl names picked, ready to go, and then when we found out we were having a boy, it took us right up until he was born to decide what we were going to name him. And I saw this online, this name on like a little board on somebody's social media. It was like, on the For You page or whatever. So it wasn't anybody that I knew. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love that name. Like, that's just so
it's very
cool.
Country.
Yeah, right. And like, and Eric's middle name is James. And I was like, Wilder James. That is the coolest cowboy name I've ever heard.
Total cowboy.
And we, we're both in country music. And I was just like, oh no, we have to, Is
he wild?
Oh, he's wild. Yes. He constantly gives me heart attacks during the day because he's all over everything. And it's just like, oh my goodness.
My oldest boy, his name is Oscar, and Oscar means Spear of God.
Oh, I love that.
And another definition is God's secret weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So I've often kind of described him as my little secret weapon.
I love that.
And he is crazy fun and crazy, and he definitely, in terms of like testing us as parents, he's definitely given us the most run for our money.
Oh my goodness.
But he's been he's incredible, and it's funny, our kids live up to their namesake in a way. And so when I was like, Wilder,
I know, and I'm such like a meaning person, right? And I remember when I it was between two names, and like I just didn't love the second name that we had. And I was like, I love the name Wilder. I think it's so cool. Like I've never heard anybody named Wilder before. And then I was like, oh, he could be a real wild child though. And that might like, bite me in the butt later on down the road. But we just went with it. And I'm like, yeah, he's totally living up to his name already.
Have you written him a song?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I've actually written him 3 songs. When we first found out we were having a boy, I was like, man, it's like so wild because there's so many female country singers with like sons and children. And I find that it's like very few and far between that you can find songs written about their kids, And I just think that's so interesting because when I became a mom, I was like, I was scared at first when I found out that I was pregnant. I was like, my career's over. I put everything else in my life on the back burner to chase this dream of mine. And I was like, it was really, really hard on me mentally because I was like, you hear all the time that once you have kids, especially as a woman, I don't know how it was for you, but for me anyways, I've been told my whole life that, don't have kids because if you do, nobody's going to take you seriously and nobody's going to think you can do it. And I definitely, when I got pregnant, like some of the people that I was working with told me, well, like you're going to be a mom now and, you're going to have a really hard fight. And like, do you want to do this anymore? All this sort of stuff. And I was just like, all these people around me are telling me I'm not going to be able to do it. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this, And so I wrote this song called Your Heart, and I wrote it for Eric and Wilder. And then when he was born, I wrote That Boy's Mother. And like I was sitting down writing the song and I'm just bawling my eyes out, crying 100% like pouring from my heart. Right. And that's a song that I want to record like immediately because it's just, I feel like it has, I feel like anybody can relate to that song. And I think it's really important. We need more songs out there for our kids, because they are a huge inspiration.
Well, when you asked me what it was like for me, you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, the reality is for moms, I mean, the baby lives off the mother for so long, right? And it's kind of like that. That's like I was able to continue working. I mean, I took some time away, but not a lot. I was still able to kind of go do my music thing and without being needed by a baby. However, I think that the game is changing. I think that it's an antiquated thought now to think that mothers can't still kind of have successful careers and whatever it is the venture they're going towards. And I'm just so glad that you didn't believe the naysayers, and you're still kind of moving on and doing big things.
Yeah, thank you. And me too. I'm glad that I didn't. And, I have to like attribute a lot of that to my husband because Eric was like, you're not giving up on yourself. Like he really had to be like my cheerleader when I was not my cheerleader at all. Cause I'd be like, I think I'm just going to be a stay-at-home mom now, like it's going to be really hard. And I love being with Wilder and all this sort of stuff. And he's like, there are working moms all over the world that are super successful, that are still great moms. You can do this, And so 3 months after Wilder was born, we were in the studio recording the next couple songs that were my singles and so it, thank God for my husband.
Like we said a few minutes ago, like you can carve your own path, and just because other people don't see it, I think that doesn't mean that it still can't exist for you. And I'm trying my best in my area in the line of work that I do to dismantle in some ways sort of antiquated ways of thinking and trying to like, especially, it's a man's world. It's been built for men by men, and all those things. And I'm trying to like, I want to be a man that's as best I can to create more equal platforms and creating space for everybody to feel like, kind of no matter your gender or your age or no matter where you are in life, that everybody has value. And I'm trying to, my wife is really for that kind of, she's not only for that, but also kind of encouraging me to take those steps. She's about to read a book. I can't remember the title at the moment, that talks about how there's so many things within our society that were constructed by men for men. Yeah. And they didn't have women's stature in mind. Like for instance, a piano. A piano was built for a man's body and a man's size without thinking about the size of the stature of a woman. Unless we know and are educated about the things that are out there, you can't really make changes. So I want to learn these things and I want to try my best to change them. And being a mom, as a musician, I think that's that's, you could do it.
Thank
and I'm
you.
glad that you are.
Thanks, Don. And also thank you for being the person that you are and wanting to make more of an equal playing ground, because I think that's absolutely, incredible of you. And for you to be aware of that is just wonderful. So thank you.
Trying my best.
Always trying to get better, right?
Always. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, going back in time, I know your story, a part of it from what I've read, that you had a struggle and a battle with cancer a number of years ago in your high school life. Yeah. Would you be willing to go back there with us and talk about some of that journey for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
How old were you when you were diagnosed with cancer?
So I was at the end, I was 17, almost 18.
That's a big time. So you were ready to graduate.
Yeah. I was born and raised in Hudson Bay, Saskatchewan. And then when I was 16, my mom, stepdad, they had job opportunities in Slave Lake, Alberta. And so my sister and I moved with them, and my dad was in Hudson Bay. And so I went to high school. I went grade 11 and grade 12 in Slave Lake. And, I was a super healthy kid. My mom's she's always trying to feed us some new sort of herbal something or other that is she's very healthy, and we're always lived a very healthy lifestyle. I was in every sport that you could imagine. I was captain of the basketball and volleyball team in grade 11 and 12. And so I was in my grade 12 year, and I remember that my school had put on this trip to go to China, and I didn't go, but I stayed. And then people in my class came back that went to China, and they all had caught a cold on the way back, and everybody was super sick. And so I ended up catching that cold, and everybody's cold went away in a week of coming back, and mine just didn't go away. Mine was getting worse and worse and worse. And I, started to have a hard time breathing, and I wasn't able to be as energetic in my sports. I lost 20 pounds in a month, and I was always in really good shape, so I didn't have 20 pounds to lose, right? And then I started getting these night sweats. And so for 2 months, we were going back and forth to the doctors, and the doctors were like, no, there's nothing wrong with you. And then they started telling me, well, maybe you have anorexia. Are you eating? And I was eating like a horse. I was eating all the donuts that you could eat at Tim Hortons. Seriously. I would drive all the donuts. And I was like, I don't have anorexia. But then you know how, when people start telling you things, it can kind of play with your head, right? I was like, maybe I am. Maybe I do. Well, I don't know. I've never been like that before, but And so anyways, it just kind of kept on getting worse and worse and worse. And my mom was getting really upset at the doctors because I was getting blood tests and all this sort of stuff, and they were coming back fine, They told my mom that she had a perfectly healthy 17-year-old daughter. My mom was just she's really spiritual. She's kind of witchy. My sister and I call my mom a witch because she always knows things, right? She's a psychic or something, It was 2 months after we'd been going back and forth to the doctor, and my mom was just kind of at her wit's end, and so was I. So my mom was sleeping one night, and she had this dream. My mom loves horses. And in this dream, this lady was brushing this horse, and this horse was choking. And that's how I felt all the time, is that I was choking, This lady turned around, she's brushing this horse, and she says to my mom, go get her chest x-rayed. And then my mom just woke up from her dream. And this is real. This is a real story. This is not, she didn't lie. She woke up at 3:00. She turns to my stepdad. She's like, we have to make an appointment right now to go get her chest x-ray. And my stepdad, who's very not spiritual and very by the book type of person, science brain, he's well, okay, but it's 3:30 in the morning, Karen, just, call in the morning. And so I was doing work at the hospital, and I was doing it that day. And so my mom called the doctor. She said, listen, I know you think that I'm crazy and that my daughter's healthy is what you think. But if you can just get her chest x-rayed for me today, I'll leave you alone. And if it comes back, everything's good, I'll leave you alone. So I went to go to work ed. And then after my work ed, I went to the x-ray place, got my chest x-rayed. 2 hours later, they called my mom, said, hey, bring Kalsey here after school. We found something and we want to talk to you about it. And my mom was like, okay. And yeah, how wild is that from that dream? If my mom didn't have that dream, who knows what would have happened, right? And so we went to the doctor, and they were like, we found a mass, but we don't know what it is. And so we weren't thinking cancer. like at all, So they're like, go to the emergency in Edmonton and you ask for a CT scan. We'll send your papers there. And so we drove 3.5 hours to Edmonton from Slave Lake. And we got into emergency. They did a CT scan on me. And we stayed overnight in the hospital. And then in the morning, the doctor comes. He's like, oh, you have a type of lymphoma. And I was like, oh, what kind of cold is that? Like, that's what I thought, right? Because that's how not I was thinking cancer. Like, who thinks cancer at 17 years old? And then the doctor was like, well, it's a type of cancer. And I was like, and then your heart just sinks, right? And it was just such a heavy thing to hear. And then my mom starts bawling, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. You know what I mean? That's what I thought, right? And so basically, they had to do more tests to make sure. They were 99% sure, but they had to be 100% sure. And so they did more tests. I had to get a few biopsies done, one surgery on my neck, and they got out a tumor, and sure enough, it was cancer. And so 2 weeks later, I started chemotherapy, and I did chemo for 6 months. And then, I've been in remission and for 5 years, and now I'm cancer free. So
that blows me away that your mom would have a dream that would lead to the discovery.
I'm telling you.
That's fascinating.
When I tell people that story, and I don't tell many people that story because it's not people are they don't believe it because it just sounds, but it was my mom. It was my mom that said that lady came to her, and I'm like, see, I told you you're a witch. It's for sure. It's true now.
I want to hear more about that, but first we're going to take a quick break. So you're in high school, you find this out. I also read that you lost all your hair, which was probably a big identity loss in some ways, I would imagine,
yes.
Right? What was that season like for you? Did you go back to school? Were you kind of carrying on as best you could, or what happened from there?
Well, I was diagnosed in May of grade 12, right? So I was almost done. I had all of my credits, and basically I was just going to go to school. I was taking phys ed, drama, and chemistry in my last semester because I was just like, well, I don't want to graduate yet.
Just coasting.
I might as well just, And so I didn't have to go back to school. And I mean, there's no way that I could have anyways, because it was just, it was so hard. Chemotherapy is a really intense treatment, you're sick for a week after treatment, and, you're weak and all that sort of stuff. And, I was doing music since I was 3 years old. Right. And so music was really healing and therapeutic for me. Thank God I knew how to play guitar and had already started writing songs because I never told anyone how I was feeling during that time. I was because I was always okay, well, I got to be strong for my family because they're not strong. Everybody's worried. It was a really hard time on my mom and my dad and all that sort of stuff. And I couldn't imagine because I'm a mom and I'm oh, that'd be the worst thing ever. But I had music and that was amazing. But, at times it was hard to sing too, because it was in my chest, right? So it took a lot to be able to sing. So I, that was a really big healing thing for me. And losing my hair, I mean, I'd never cut my hair ever since I've never cut my hair when I was little. It was always just trim, right? So I had long hair down to my butt. And so losing my hair, we had a shaving party to try and make light of things. And all of my friends and my mom and my sister, we all just bawled the whole time because it was just so sad, and I just felt I looked like a monster after my hair fell off, because I was already looking sick and all that sort of stuff. Right. And, it was a very traumatizing time for sure. But I learned a lot too, because, when you're going through chemotherapy, you're meeting all of these incredible people, that are getting chemo at the same time, And so there'd be people beside me that were given 3 months to live or 3 weeks to live or a year to live. And we would just talk. And I was kind of the cheerleader in the hospital. The nurses would come and they'd be hey, you're such a ray of sunshine. This person's having a really hard time. Can you come and brighten their day? And I still have a girl that our chemo sessions would be on the same time. And she still reaches out to me and like, she thanks me for, getting her through the hard times, because I think that was just, when you take focus off of yourself and like, you just want to help other people. Cause I knew that I was going to be okay. Right. Like the doctors said, like, it's an easy cancer to beat. It's the one that you'd want to get. And so like, you have like a 79% chance of surviving. And I was like, well, that's not terrible, and
that's still an A, I think, right? An A or a B plus?
I think 79 is a B plus. Yeah.
B plus. Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, I just kind of focused on other people, and I learned so many incredible people. And I was like, because at the end, like when I didn't know that I had cancer, I was like, okay, well, I'm either going to go to school to be a nurse, or I'm going to do music full time. And I was like, well, music, you can't do music full time, And then after I was diagnosed with cancer was when I was like, you know what, I'm going to do what I love for the rest of my life, because I don't know when my last day is going to be. And also too, like there's people that I became really close with in going through chemo, and some of them died. And like, it was like the most heartbreaking thing ever, because they were my age. And I remember thinking that, you know what, they can't go and follow their dreams. So I have almost a responsibility and a duty to follow my own dreams for them. If I'm not going to do it for myself, I better do it for the people that don't get to do that, So it was a very...
That's a big statement. I think about that all the time. Like I heard somebody they say the other day, I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I'm going to get this wrong. Something along the lines of like, just merely your existence here should be enough for you to want to go out and live the best life, because there are far more reasons why you shouldn't be here. And it's like, oh yeah. And I've thought that way too, where it's like, I feel like I have a responsibility for those that don't have this opportunity to do this and to do what we're doing. And if you have this passion, this fire, this thing that you want to do, I feel like you kind of owe it to those that can't in some ways. That resonates with me for sure.
Like, it's just, I will think back to those people sometimes, like even now still, because obviously it was a huge thing in my life. And that's like one of the drivers that I have to keep on going, is because, first of all, I want to be able to show people that no matter what, you can do whatever you put your mind to, like just chase your dreams. And I think back to those people that didn't have the opportunity to do it. And that's like the biggest fire, I guess, under my butt.
Being that ray of light in amongst those that were sort of, terminally ill, where does that come from for you? Like, obviously you had this diagnosis. You didn't allow your mind to go, well, this is going to kill me. You said, I think I can beat this. But where does that come from, this idea of being a ray of sunshine or a light to others? Where does that come from?
I don't know. That's just what people told me, that's like, they were like, I think I've always been a really positive person. I remember like the first conversation that I had with my uncle, my mom's brother, because he came down to Edmonton. He's only lived 2 hours away from Edmonton. And so he came down when we all found out that I was diagnosed with cancer, where he was really emotional though. And I was like, don't worry. I was like, I'm not going to die. I'm going to be okay. And it was just a knowing, right? I was like, this is a lesson for me. I'm going to take this experience and this opportunity to grow and be a better person, and I'm going to run with it. And I think too, like part of the reason of me wanting to go in and kind of bring like joy and positivity to people was to just kind of not think about my own like worries, because like, even though you're a positive person, it's always like, well, what if, you know what I mean? What if things take a turn for the worse or something? Right. You know what I mean? If I can help make someone's day brighter or better, or just put a smile on their face, then, that's an amazing thing to be able to do.
It sounds like to me too that you had, both having the shaving party and having your mom there and your uncles, and people sort of gathered around you. Was that a big thing around that time too? Obviously, people being around.
Like I had a huge support system, which was absolutely incredible. My dad flew to Edmonton every chemo session. Like he flew from Hudson Bay, he drove to Saskatoon, and then flew from Saskatoon to Edmonton. And he came for every session. My mom was there, my sister was there, my grandma and aunt. They all came up when they first found out, and it was always just like, I had, like my family is incredible. They're amazing. And, I looked, and I also too, I looked around when I was getting chemo and other people were getting chemo, and some people never had anybody with them. And like, that's another reason that I wanted to go and like, bring positivity to people, because I was like, I have all these people, that love and support me. Like, I need to go and give some to people that don't have it, because that really broke my heart. I'm like, this is like a really tough experience for anybody. And some people don't have anybody. Well, I need to go and be that somebody for that person,
A lot of people that we chat with here have found ways to use their misfortunes and serve other people with it and through it. And I find that is at least for me, the best way I can live my life is knowing that my life is here. I'm present to be in service of others. And that's definitely a common thing when I chat with people on this show. And I'm definitely getting that sense from you that you're wanting to serve.
I think that's like the whole thing about music too. I first realized what music can do when I was 7 years old, when my parents separated. And my dad, we used to listen to that Kevin Sharp song called Nobody Knows It But Me. Do you remember that song?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It's like a heartbreak song. And so basically it's a breakup song. And I remember like, I'm an empathetic person. I've always been. And at 7 years old, I remember my dad listening to this song on repeat. And I knew exactly what my dad was feeling without him talking about his feelings, because he never talked about his feelings. And I remember like, wow, that's what music can do for people, And then when I was diagnosed with cancer, obviously I wrote a lot about my own cancer experiences. Like I wrote a song called Runaway, because that's what I wanted to do when I first got to like my first chemo experience. I was like, I don't want to be here. Like I want to run, And then I wrote a song probably like halfway through my chemo experience called Does God Really Care? And it was because like of all the people that I seen in the, obviously I know that God cares, and I am a spiritual person. I believe in God. But I was like, really questioning it, because I was like, all these incredible people like going through such a hard time and they're like dying, like what's the point of that, And I really had a hard time with that. And I wrote this song. And so I would go out to these songwriter nights when I was feeling well enough to do that. And I'd play these songs, and I'd go to church and I'd play these songs, and people would come up to me, like adults, like men and women, and they'd be like, I had cancer, or somebody that I know has had cancer. And like, I've always felt this way, but like, I never knew how to describe it. And you did it for me. So like, thank you. People would thank me for that. And I was like, this is my purpose, like this is why I'm supposed to do music. And this is why I went through this experiences, so that I can, do this and give this to other people, like be a voice for other people.
That song you mentioned a moment ago made me think of, I wrote a song, my shameless plug here. I wrote a song last year called What Were You Thinking? And it's sort of directed to God, and it's sort of like talks about these things that happen. And it's like, God, if you're there, where were you in this season, in this thing? And I haven't put it out, but maybe it'll come. But I was going to ask you sort of what comes next. So then you had gone through the chemo, and you went into remission, and you're cancer free now for how long? Like it's been
15 years. Like it'll be 15 years remission, like or cancer free now in October. So yeah.
Okay. And there's been no, have you gone for other tests and things along the way just to make sure that everything stays good? Yeah, you have to for the first 5 years after you're done chemotherapy. You have to go for like a 6 month checkup for the first 5 years. And yeah, everything's been really good, and I've obviously taken like a lot of steps to keep my body alkaline and, be healthy and all that sort of stuff. So it's, never want to go back there. So I just want to, it was a learning experience, learned a lot, move on, and hopefully, everything stays good. I wanted to ask you about your parents. So you've mentioned your mom and your stepdad, or your both
stepdad and dad,
yeah. Are they all still with you? Are they still in your sphere?
My parents actually, so, when the pandemic hit, Eric and I were living in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'd lived there for 5 years, absolutely loved it. It was like the first time in my life that I felt like this is where I'm meant to be, And so the pandemic hit, we lost our publishing draw, which is like, your monthly draw for publishing. We still had our publishing deals. We just lost the payment just because everybody was in hard times, right? So we had to leave Nashville. Well, we moved into a van for like the year. And then it is epic.
Pretty epic.
We were wild for sure. But we did that. It was called Love on the Road. We toured all across Canada 5 times, playing shows, backyard, social distance. And it was amazing. We put a stage on the roof. It was so much fun. Like, I would recommend, if anybody ever thought about living in a van, you should do it. And I do sometimes I just miss being in the van because it was so cool. You park and then you open the doors and it's like this gorgeous scenery everywhere. Right. But then when we got pregnant with Wilder, I was like, I'm not living in a van with a baby. Sorry. I'm not doing that. And so my parents were gracious enough to let us live with them for 2 years. And that was, obviously amazing of them. And, they still take Wilder all the time in Edmonton. And my dad's in Hudson Bay, so I don't see him as much. But they're all super supportive and awesome people.
I got to know how many times, and this is a bit of a dated joke, but did people say to you guys, living in a van down by the river? Did that come up?
All the time.
That come up every day?
And Eric was the person that, when we'd be at shows, he'd always say, yeah, we're living in a van down by the river. And I'm like, this is getting way too old. You were saying this all the time. Literally, everybody said it to us. It was just, we made a joke out of it. So it was funny.
Well, if you beat them to the punchline, they'll leave you alone. Yeah. That's maybe what it is. Yeah, that must have been an adventure, because I remember watching social media and seeing you guys getting ready and doing the build and the retrofitting the van for being able to be lived in. And that's so cool. So you've been through cancer. Yeah. You lived in a van down by the river for a while. Yeah. You've now got a son. Music career is going well. You got a new single out now. What's down the road for Kalsey Kulyk?
If you would ask me that question 2 years ago, I probably would have been like, well, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. But we have 3 more singles in the bucket. And I'm really excited about this next season of music because I find it's the direction that I've always wanted to go. And I did go with my first self-titled record, but it's a little bit more that way. And, I'm still obviously writing a bunch, which is amazing. I love doing that and playing shows. We're actually going to be going to Spain this year. Eric and I were playing a country music festival out in Spain. So we're really excited about that. Cool. But yeah, I want to release a record in September. So I've got a few more songs to record and, just doing the thing, going full force.
Kalsey, honestly, thank you so much for sharing all that with us. I think this podcast, we aim to sort of help people through these stories and whatever it is that they're going through. And I think sometimes people see the face, they see what you do, and they don't always know the story behind. You've been pretty open with your story all along, and I think that's definitely a gift that you offer people, kind of being that heart on your sleeve type of artist in person. But I know that these kinds of conversations help a lot of folks out there that are listening that just need to know they're not alone in the struggles that they're going through. And so thanks for sharing.
Well, thank you for having a platform for people to share their stories and to hopefully inspire somebody out there, and for just being an all around great guy, Don. You're always just seriously such an amazing person, and you're a great artist. And I just, I admire you and everything that you do. And thank you for having me on the show. And it was really nice to talk to you.
Thanks, Kalsey. And I look forward to seeing you and Eric and Wilder down the road sometime soon.
Yes, you too, Don. Take care.
As I always say, it takes a village to run things here at Through the Fire. And I want to thank my village, executive producer Sarah Burke, administrators Lori Brown and Alan Greyeyes, video and audio design by Chris Gaudry and his team at 44 Films, Feisty Creative for their design work, social media support by Johnson Design Company, and last but far from least, I want to thank our technical producers Matt Kundle and Evan Serminski from the Sound Off Media Company. I look forward to sharing more great conversations just like this one on the next Through the Fire. You see the light.
Produced and distributed by the Sound Off Media Company.